Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from what I'm sure was a very interesting and interactive session. As we near the conclusion of this landmark symposium on biochemistry and molecular biology education, I warmly invite Dr. Taranga Thoradeniya to chair the final session. Dr. Taranga Thoradeniya is co-chair of the Symposium Committee and Vice President of CBSL. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you, Ashwini. So a warm welcome to you all again. As you're aware, session 2 took place in 4 parallel sessions. I can certainly testify that some very stimulating discussions took place, even better perhaps than at a face-to-face conference. So session 3 is the opportunity for each of the groups to share their important findings that came out from the discussions. So without taking much time, let's start. I will invite one speaker from each discussion room to give the summary. So I will start with the parallel group 1. I would like to invite Professor Sugandhika Suresh from the College of Biochemists of Sri Lanka, facilitator of the discussion on large class teaching, to present the summary. Over to you, Sugandhika.
Thank you, Taranga. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to present the findings of the discussion on large group teaching. So let me share the screen to show the slides that we have prepared. So can you see the slides?
Yes, Sugandhi, you can use the presenter mode. Thank you, that's clear.
Right. So one of the issues that we discussed in our breakout group is keeping the learners interested and focused during a virtual large class. So we discussed how to keep them focused and interested. So the gap or the challenge here was the lack of interest and attention. And the way forward suggestion was to have more interactive sessions in between the classes or throughout the class to keep their attention, maybe deviate from the topic, but not very much, but still to keep the attention, have small activities, and also to show them relevant podcasts from time to time, and giving them videos or other things during the class to get their attention. And another gap that we identified was signing in and then leaving. And to overcome that, our contributors and the participants suggested asking questions from time to time, calling by the name, so that randomly students feel, okay, I'm going to be called, and they will not leave. So the next thing we addressed was how ensuring the learners in large classes are interested and focused on the lecture. So the challenge is that they get distracted during the class, and the ways forward suggested was to send them the PowerPoint and other materials relevant 2 or 3 days before the classes, and then ask them to prepare and participate in the class. And then providing studying materials relevant to the topic also was suggested. And then the other point that we discussed was motivating the learners to learn actively by interacting and contributing during a class. So the gap and the challenge was the lack of interaction between the lecturer and the students among themselves, the social interactions being lost. So we wanted as the solution to divide the students during the class into smaller groups and then ask them to discuss about the topic and present in the main class. And then to overcome the lack of continuity, we thought we should relate the topic of learning to interest in real life incidents and discuss with the students on their views and experiences. So after a large class, how can we keep them motivated? So the gap was the lack of on-site interactions. So having frequent formative assessments was suggested, and then to keep them motivated during the whole term, to upload the videos of lectures for them to go through. And then one other suggestion was to introduce questions or a very difficult problem which would need more attention to find answers, where we can really give questions testing their higher order of learning. So those are the things that we came up in the large class. Thank you, Taranga.
Thank you, Sugandhi. I think some of the issues that we face in large class teaching is more or less similar to what we face in on-site large class teaching. But the solutions, as you have discussed, might be different when we do the large classes online to keep the students' attention, for example. Right, so while thanking you, I would like to move to the next breakout session. And I would like to invite Professor Yang Movie to give the summary on the discussion on teaching lab. Floor is yours, Yang Movie.
Thanks, Taranga. Okay, let me share my screens here. All right, can you see the screens, the full screen?
Yes, we can see.
All right, thank you. All right, let me make my summary and making sense to all of us here. Our topic is on the teaching labs. Right, so for the first questions, who has conducted online teaching labs? So in total, there are 78% of all that have conducted the online teaching labs, and 22% are having, do not have the experience yet. For question number 2, how are the teaching labs different to any other teachings that happens? So first, I would like to highlight that the red colored sentences are actually referring to the advantages rather than gaps and challenges. So for this part, get connected with students, collaborative group work, skills engaged in research, hands-on experience cannot be replaced by virtual labs. And the virtual labs, convenience, can conduct experiments on time or later, and lower cost and no maintenance cost is needed, and we can actually use up to the state of arts technologies. Way forward for this is we actually have to show the videos with the designs, experiments, and be more proactive. Proper plannings of the experiments, and students can watch the videos repeatedly, and also they have this group work, and also they can have that submissions later on. For these particular questions here, gaps and challenges, one thing that all of us agree is on the density of students in one class. We can't have a larger class as usual. We have to have it into a smaller group so that the conducts of the classes can be more effective. If they say the project to be done on a very basic level for students, and the way forward for this is to have extra monitoring with the students so that they can learn more in depth. And the third point here for gap and challenges under these questions, students, they cannot meet each other and there is no social engagement. So through virtual classes, the human connectivity or connectedness are not there. So the way forwards, we still have to have these face-to-face classes, but it has to be in a very small, smaller groups if the face-to-face class is needed. Let us continue, still on the question number 2. This is actually more related to clinical practical classes or clinical posting, where we actually involve the human as a simulations classes. Yeah, this is we can't be helped that we need to have this face-to-face class, and we need to change a little bit the teaching methods so that we can reduce the human contact during the practical sessions. And you know, this is also related to the experience learning and hands-on training. So for this particular gaps here, we have no choice that we have to conduct in a newer way, where we have to ensure the proper SOP and also the social distancing need to be observed when conducting the practical classes. And on top of this as well, the instructors, facilitators or lecturers, they also have to familiarize with themselves with those latest methods or pedagogies that used to conduct all these practical classes, so that they can actually deliver the sessions more effectively, and students can learn it in the easiest way. We move on to the question number 3, how to keep the learners interested and also focused during a virtual or remote teaching labs. We agree that, you know, virtual classes or online teaching and learning is not an enjoyable moment for all, including the lecturers. So they cannot enjoy the sessions, and students also can't really enjoy these sessions, because I think that this is probably due to the interactions among lecturers and students. Yeah, so what we can do to improve for this is we have to change a little bit of the concept of the teaching. So what we need to do is we focus more on the concept of the particular practical classes, rather than really focus on the hands-on experience, things like that. And related to that also, the learning outcomes, we need to change it to adapt to what we actually you know, having or available to conduct our online practical classes. And all this also have to tie down to the policy of all the universities, that they decide to have their own virtual or online practical classes. Some allow, some doesn't allow. Their students have all these interactions with their lecturers and things like that. So it all depends on the policy. And with this also, videos or animations can be provided for students to have their group discussions, and students have to do their reports together. That is more on the cooperative work. Let us move on again on question number 3, how to get the learners interested and focused during the virtual teaching labs. First is here we can see motivations problem, students satisfactions. I think this one all of us can agree that, you know, we have to have great motivations to our students, because students can't really engage themselves sitting in front of the computer for hours and trying to learn the practical classes or practical sessions from their lecturers. And under these situations, the instructors or the facilitators, they have to be more interactive and try to engage the, you know, the interactions with the students. The contents cannot be too long, too lengthy, and need to have small breaks in between and by asking questions or ask the students to answer the question through Google Forms or any other platforms. And time management is very important as well. We have to have a timetable that cater to the needs of the students in between their lectures and also practical classes. You know, we can't have longer hours for all this. So these are the things that comes to the planning by the lecturers or the facilitators. And we also have to be more selective in terms of conducting the practical classes. We need to have look into the content and the skills and method that we can allow students to learn through the virtual platforms, things like that. And if they say the classes is very important and need face-to-face, you know, interactions, and then these are the way that we can do by volunteer. We have to conduct the lab classes for the students that willingly to come back. Yeah, this is the choices that we can give it to students. And of course, we can't neglect those that can't really come back to the practical classes. So we have to think of other solutions for this group of students as well. And for this particular practice, we need to divide students into the small classes, you know, maybe less than 10. One of the example given is like, you know, reduced to 4 to 2, things like that. This is to allow the effectiveness in terms of learning. And we also discussed about vaccinations. Once vaccination is done for all students, mandatory for our medical students, then we can also, you know, start conducting our face-to-face classes. But they also have to observe the SOP strictly, because infections will be there as well, though we have vaccinations, yeah, done for our students. And we also can think of some of the quantitative analysis for our medical students, where we can actually refer to some of the clinical data analysis, for example, like enzyme kinetic studies. This is more on the analysis, yeah, offline analysis, which we can give to our medical students. All right, let's move on. Gap and challenges for question number 4. How do we know that the learner is in the teaching labs are in fact interested and focused? I think this is quite hard for all of us, and not only the lecturers or the facilitators, and also it goes to the students as well, because it's hard to engage them. Yeah. So what we can do is we have to kind of force students to turn on their webcam so that we can actually see each other. So it can enhance the interactions sessions between the lecturers and also the students. And the other methods that are proposed by our group's members is on the adaptive release practice, where students are required to do their work and also trying to answer whatever that you know, given to them, so the questions, and the students who work on that, they have to submit all these assignments and reports before they are allowed to move on to another classes. So this is to ensure that the students engage in the classes, and they can actually work on the answer later on after the practical classes. And by doing so, we can actually make them to work on their own collaboratively, meaning that they will work together to get the assignment done. And also we can make the students do the presentations in the groups or individually after the assignment. Let's move on. Question number 6. Are there innovative solutions you have introduced to your classes, particularly for those country or universities that having less resources? First is cannot replace with practical equipment. So some of the equipments we can't replace it through virtual practice. So what we can do is we encourage you know, students to have some things that they can reach out, yeah, at their home. This is what we mentioned here, using indigenous material, which we refer to the remote laboratory. Whatever they can reach out, they can do it, then they do it for that experiments. All right. For this particular point here, students are actually required to learn by themselves. Okay. Another point here, challenging to teachers with on and off lockdown. Yeah, I think this is a constant stress that all of us facing. You know, during this moment, we've been facing this lockdown on and off. So for this particular challenge that we are facing, what we need to do is we have to be more flexible and adaptive to conduct our virtual classes or even the face-to-face classes, depend on the policy and the practice, which is you know, under the implementations by each of the universities or the country's policy. Yeah, so this is you know, what we can do is we just have to be flexible and adapt to the situations and do all the best that we could provide the trainings to our students. And one thing we can actually enhance for our virtual practical classes is to use the AI technologies and other apps which can enhance the teaching process here for these virtual practical classes. All right, we move on to question number 7. There are many other areas that we do not cover so far that you would like to give your view on, and are they actually learning? This is the some of the challenges that we face, particularly for our students. Those students that move from year 1 to year 2 and year 3. I think the students' participations in the labs or whatever that they would like to learn through the practical classes, they agree that, you know, they are not satisfied with what they can do because the learning process is not up to the optimums. Yeah, there are still limitations that they cannot overcome, and they can't learn it fully for what they're supposed to do. And this is unlike to our research students. They still can be allowed to come to the lab to do their experiments with strict limitations and so or the SOP. So for this particular challenge, of course, it will affect the quality of our students or our graduates, particularly more on the scientific skills. And of course, some of the experiments we can't neglect, but some of the experiments we can't neglect it, particularly for our biochemists or our students that taking the subjects in biochemistry or molecular biochemistry or the molecular biologies. And of course, most likely it will affect the employability of our students as well. So for this particular challenge, the way forward, still again, we need to try our best to divide our students as to many groups as possible as we could, and we will try to conduct all the experiments with them, yeah, so that they can learn as much as they could. And yeah, the point here, we need to be flexible in conducting all these teachings to our students, right? And last one is, how do we consider equal opportunity to our students? I think this issue also very pertinent to all of us, everybody in this room. You know, we talk about resources in terms of access to the internet. You know, some are good, some are not. And also the software access, or the we can actually own the software for our learning as well, like virtual reality. Some students can own it and they can learn more in depth about that particular subjects and things like that. So for this particular equal opportunity, I think we have to also be flexible and try to plan our work accordingly so that students can learn equally, and try to accommodate the students' needs as possible as we could. And the other thing is what we can improve is, you know, collaborations among institutions or country through virtual classes, meaning like cyber classes, so we can help among each other, yeah, from, you know, all nations in this particular challenge that we are facing for this equal opportunity. I think with that, I end my summary here. I hand over back to Taranga. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Yang Mui. So we discussed how we can use this opportunity or the challenges as catalyst for change. And then I'm moving into the next group. Challenges in assessment was discussed in the parallel group 3. Prof. Shamila Jayasinghe from College of Biochemists will now share their insights. Over to you, Shamila.
Thank you, Taranga. So I'd like to acknowledge the other facilitators, Professor Helen Wenjiang and Tuampong Sutiponchai, who facilitated the session with me and worked on the final parallel PowerPoint slide, and all the participants in the discussion group who helped to come up with what I'm going to present now. So let me share the screen. Just give me a few minutes.
We can see the slide now, Shamila.
You can see the whole slide. Okay.
Yes.
Right. So we considered this in 3 sections, ensuring that learning outcomes are achieved. So we design a curriculum with certain learning outcomes, and we wanted to know whether we can, under these circumstances, ensure that all these learning outcomes are being tested. So we looked at it in 3 different ways: knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So for the knowledge, of course, one of the key things was the use of open book assessments, and online vivas, structured vivas, to test the students under the current online assessment method. The open book seemed like a way you can something that you can use, and to also quite a few felt that we should focus more on formative assessments rather than summative assessments. And the challenge of testing skills was seen, and what we felt was that the experience is important, and also to be able to test them in person is still important, and that is one of the biggest challenges. So there were suggestions that we could test them using simulation, and after class discussions, use Google Forms. Some had used Google Forms, where you could test the thinking skills of the student. And for attitudes, also for skills, the team-based assessments, where you could test their team skills as well as verbal communication and peer learning, and also their ability to illustrate something that can be shown. Again, people had used kind of a Google form where they can write their answers and send it. And for attitudes also, the team-based assessment we felt was a good thing, where you could see the, I'm sorry, I can't see my screen. Yep. So to allow students to monitor their own learning, again, the team-based assignments felt like a good thing that we can do. The next aspect that we looked at was whether we can assess whether the depth of assessment, whether we can assess the students the same depth that we used to assess under normal on-site methods. So again, we looked at this in the form of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And we felt that the open book assessment will allow you to test at a sufficient depth, where you can ask them for critical questions, where it's not knowledge-based, but the how and the why kind of questions will allow you to ensure that the depth is achieved. And use software to monitor the progression of their learning. And again, where you could use an online chat, online vivas, to see whether the students have actually understood what they're saying. So we could see whether they are actually writing the answers themselves. For skills and competencies, again, making team assessments would be useful, where you could see whether they have that sort of team-based skills have been learned. And software simulation, where instead of wet lab, where you could use software simulation and then follow it up with an assessment. And for clinical cases could be used to test that would apply to medical students. And again, the attitudes, the students in teamwork assignments, where we could use peer evaluation and see whether the students, how they, again, the attitudes could be tested. And the third part was ensuring credibility and preventing cheating in online assessments. So this is a big challenge to ensure credibility. So here again, what people felt was that the open book exams is probably the way to go, where you can test the critical thinking, and that would where the questions are such that you don't just get the answer direct from the book, but they would still have to think. So, and you can check the answers. If you give essay type questions, you can check across the answers to see whether they're writing the same thing. So, and also people discussed about the use of webcams position to view the student's environment, and open book questions with limited time and a camera on, where you can see whether the student is attempting to talk to someone. Then they also suggested shuffling questions or shuffling answers when it comes to multiple choice questions. And then another thing was to cross-check the authenticity via after an interview chat, after an online exam. And another thing that was suggested was standardizing the marks in an open book exam, so that, well, this was initially discussed in general, but if everyone is allowed to use the books to test it, then we can have a mechanism where it's not the actual mark, but the marks get standardized. So if everyone is doing better, then that would still be all right. So yeah, that's what we came up with to move forwards.
Thank you, Shamila. Since we have limited time, I'm directly moving into the next summary. So to our knowledge, this is the first time that student perception have been invited at a conference on biochemistry and molecular biology education. So I'm sure parallel session 4 had a lot of fun with the role plays and lively debates. So over to Indika Neloliyanage to summarize the discussions. Indica, you have to unmute yourself and maybe put the presentation on presentation mode, the slide on presentation mode.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see the slides?
Slide is visible. If it's better if you can have it on presenter mode.
Yeah.
Thank you, Indica.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for giving us young blood a platform to voice up our opinions. I know that there could be so many repetitions in the content, and this is not an exhaustive list. And I thank all the participants in our session who actively contributed in generating these ideas, identifying gaps and challenges, and way forward and suggestions. And the first, like the gap or the challenge that we could identify was that there is lack of motivation during the online lectures or the virtual sessions, and as well as after the online lectures. So the strategies we need to follow during the sessions are different from that we need to follow after the sessions. So the during sessions, we may use polls, using humor during lectures, and like back and forth questions in the sessions. So these things are not very new. We know that these are things already that are included in most of the lectures, but I think the this could be incorporated more and more and more frequently. And we do understand for the lecturer, adding humor to these sessions could be okay, am I to include this role plays drama and to add humor? Maybe asking for trouble. We do understand the feeling, but it's more of a balancing act. Like you need to take the challenge and try it once and see whether it can be put into effect and whether it is useful. So that you need to explore it depending on your experiences and your innovative ideas. And for lack of motivation after online lectures, it was a little controversial whether humor could have a continuous or sustained motivation on students to get engaged actively in their learning activities. Of course, certain examples like mnemonics and mind mapping can stimulate students to have a sustained motivation after online lectures, because these things they can apply from first year to last final year mnemonics. We tend to remember mnemonics that we have learned in first year for the rest of our lives. And more than having this sense of humor in lectures, I think if we can constantly remind of the end goals of studying all this, telling them the future application and consequence of not learning these things, and what would happen if you do not learn things. So that would be a better idea to have a lack of motivation. So during sessions, during lectures or our activities, I think we need to keep a little room there to tell students, maybe sharing our personal experiences. Okay, this is what is going to happen to you if you do not learn these things. And these are the examples where people went into troubles because they did not know these things. So that constantly reminding students of the end goals is it was identified as key element in any learning session, right? And to ensure that the lessons were understood, I think this is something like in an online platform, because when you are doing, when teachers are doing this in person in lecture halls, we see the blank faces of the students, teachers see blank faces of us, and they know that the student has not understood this, so I need to repeat it again. Like you follow the non-verbal communication, facial expressions, so that is limiting. Yes, in Zoom platforms, this like you can open up video, and that is possible. But maybe sometimes students are not in a presentable manner, and they will not always come up with their videos on, right? So, so one strategy we can like use to understand whether, or get real-time feedback whether they have understood it clearly or not is using polls very frequently. But these things are all already there in these platforms, but just that we need to use them a little more frequently. And another gap we have identified was low student participation. That could be anyway due to motivation as well, and frequent use of breakout rooms, and communication, frequent use of communication through chat box, and using these fun activities such as puzzles, dramas, and role play. You know, when teachers assign students this mundane task, like preparing answers for a particular question, answering MCQs, like because of lack of motivation, they will go into breakout rooms and discuss some other stuff and get deviated from the topics. So we as students would like to invite our teachers to include more and more interactive sessions like puzzles, dramas, role play. Then again, it's a balancing act, and like you need to be a little precautious. Teachers may need to be a little precautious to like prevent us from getting deviated from the main objective. And there was a question, which online platform to be used? So are we using Zoom very frequently? Is it because it is the most is it because it is the best platform that we could use? So, and like nobody knew the current, the summative idea of the current light of evidence. So are there any meta-analysis conducted, like meta-analysis conducted using the researchers conducted during this COVID-19 pandemic? And this is an area that we identified as an area that we need to explore further, and that evidence will be useful to policymakers or administrators to take decisions as to what platform has to be used in these setups, and depending on the country. So the ethnic ethnic factors and social factors also like determine which platform to be used. And then again, this lack of multisensory stimulation is very important when we talk about biochemistry, because we all know many of biochemical tests use this change of color in a reaction to like detect certain compounds. So, but when it comes to virtual platforms, we will mention the color, but but it will not give a multisensory stimulation. And we touch things in laboratories. We look through microscopes, and we like handle equipments. So tactile stimulation, visual stimulation is lacking in this platform. So I think if like movies evolved from 2D to 3D to 4D these days, why can't these learning strategies evolve into 4D platforms? I think this is an area that we could explore. We invite all of you to like think of like future research that we can enhance this multisensory stimulation. Maybe we can incorporate some strategies to like introduce tactile stimulation, more and more visual stimulation, and all. And finally, lack of access to new generation virtual platforms. We know the commonly used ones are Zoom and Microsoft Teams and these Google platforms. Right? Other than that, there are some other like extremely virtual platforms where students create avatars and use these avatars to get access to virtual libraries, virtual learning classes, and these avatars also can interact with the students who get access, and it can be accessed from anywhere at any time. And we identified in most of the countries, as far as our like breakup group concerned, depending on participants that we had, these extreme new generation virtual platforms were not frequently used. I think some people even were not really aware of the existence of this new generation virtual platforms. I think even though it may not be a good idea to this deteriorate in this balance, like we need to have a balancing act to which extent we are going to use this extreme new generation virtual platforms. But I think at least a few students might make use of it, and we need to introduce these to students as well, students like us, and we need to inform the authorities to introduce these to curriculum. Thank you so much. I know this is not an exhaustive list. That is all what we've got. Thanks.
Thank you, Indika, for that excellent summary. I think I missed a very interactive and fun-filled discussion, and you all have come up with very good suggestions because finally for teachers, student is the final user. So we have to definitely, take ideas from the students. So one thing is clear, we need more exploration, and as teachers, we need more training, and as students also, more training is required. So while thanking all the facilitators who presented the summary of the discussion, I know it's not an exhaustive summary, but we are planning to produce a report out of this. At the end of the day now, we know that roads fork, and the travelers need to choose one that best suits them. So no educational interventions can be applied universally. But it's clear that we need to research more and find the best suited options that is available, and explore more for new options like the student perception discussed about why not moving from 2D to 3D and 4D and so on. Yes, of course. And lastly, I will take a moment to be realistic and acknowledge that there are challenges in the road ahead. Some have been discussed, some may be quite unpredictable. However, as a learning community, I think we can lend strength to each other on the way forward. With that note, I thank all of you for a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.